Hello friends, welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss about the recent developments that have been taking place in Ukraine. See, recently in an interview, the Belarusian president Lukashenko said he would ask Russia to return nuclear weapons back to Belarus if Russia transfers nuclear weapons to Poland or Lithuania. Poland and Lithuania shares borders with Belarus. So if Russia deploys the nuclear weapons at its border, then he will be asking Russia to transfer nuclear weapons back to them. So why is asking to return back the nuclear weapons? What is the history behind it? Let us discuss in detail. So this is a Soviet Union before 1991. Soviet Union is a combination of various Soviet republics. After the fall of Soviet Union, all these republics become independent countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, like Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Armenia. All these countries become independent. Later, after the fall of Soviet Union in 1991, thousands of nuclear weapons were left in Ukraine, Kazakhstan and Belarus by the Russians, because as they are successors of Soviet Union, they got some nuclear weapons. Russians got some nuclear weapons in Ukraine, some, Kazakhstan some, and Belarus. At that moment, if you compare that strength of nuclear weapons, at that point of time, Ukraine is the world's third largest nuclear power. It has very large nuclear arsenal at that point of time after Russia and US. But after a series of discussions between these countries and US, UK and Russia for denuclearization, they signed Budapest Agreement or Memorandum in 1994. Under this agreement or memorandum, Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan have agreed to denuclearize its nuclear weapons and signed NPT. So in effect, they gave up their nuclear weapons. What does they in return they got? In return, the US, UK and Russia provided security against threats or use of force against the territorial integrity and political independence of these countries. So as a result, whenever there is a war or when there is an aggression on these countries, the US, UK and Russia will come to its rescue. So as a result, between 1994 and 96, these countries gave up their nuclear weapons. This is the history. See, Belarus had given back the nuclear weapons to Russia without any condition. They accepted Budapest Agreement. This is a historical Budapest Agreement being signed. See, the Budapest Memorandum signed in 1994. See, the country which has to protect. So if at all the Ukraine got invaded or attacked by any power, the Russia, US and UK has come to its rescue. But what has happened in 2014? Russia itself occupied Crimea. The country which has to protect has in fact occupied Crimea from Ukraine. This is the irony of this country. Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, and now just because Ukraine had no nuclear weapons, so Russia attacked this country. I already said in my previous video that why Russia invaded Ukraine. It is for a simple reason, because the former Soviet Republic country Ukraine becoming very close to the Western world, and in fact it wants to join the European Union and the NATO. The NATO is, you have to understand, NATO is completely against Russia. So a former close ally or close partner Ukraine now joining against Russia itself cannot be taken very easily by Russians. NATO. What is NATO? NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is a defense treaty. It is actually a defense treaty. It is a collective defense treaty. As per Article 5 of NATO, the armed attack against one or more ally is treated as an attack against every member, and every other NATO member will come to their defense. But the only time this article of NATO was invoked is after 9/11 terrorist attack in USA. The NATO consists of 28 European and 2 North American countries. See, what is that the incorporation of former Eastern Bloc and Soviet Union countries had been a cause of tension between NATO and Russia, as I already mentioned it. You have to know this is not the first time a former Soviet republic joining the NATO or the European Union. Previously also, if you see in 2004, the countries of Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania have joined EU as well as NATO, which is against Russia. At that point of time, the response is not that much against by the Russian leaders. The reason why now this kind of response or invasion has taken place because of the change in leadership. Now Putin is an ultimate dictator, and with the change in leadership in 2012, when Putin became the president of Russia, the situation began to change. He don't want the Western influence on the former Soviet Union republics, which he felt as a threat to his country. It may be through negotiations, threats, or through invasions. Putin wants to stop the Western influence on these Soviet Republic countries. So he used the invasion technique to stop other countries from joining EU and NATO. When all countries or the former Soviet republics joining the Western blocs, it was Belarus which is pro-Russia even today. The Lukashenko had been in power since 1994. Russia is a key ally of Belarus. During large-scale protests against Lukashenko following his victory in elections, which were alleged to be rigged by the opposition and the Western community, Putin extended his support and recognized Lukashenko. Even the friendship is so deep that in the last week, Lukashenko even allowed Russian troops to use Belarusian territory to invade Ukraine from the north. This is a clear partnership and the level of partnership and friendship between these two leaders. Responses by the world community. People all over the world are protesting against Vladimir Putin to stop the war. Even the Russians themselves are hitting the streets to protest against Putin. The European countries have decided to block their airspace for Russian flights. All these countries have decided to stop or block the Russian flights from entering their airspace. Various other countries also imposing sanctions on them. Countries like USA, Germany, France have already announced their support for Ukraine and started supplying weapons to Ukrainian army. US and its allies have already imposed severe sanctions on Russia. The US, EU and UK, Canada have announced that the assets of Russian central banks will be frozen. USA President Biden had announced the frozen of the assets of the central bank, and it will have affect the Russian economy, and the assets worth of $250 billion will be frozen. So Russian banks will also be excluded or will not be used for will not be allowed for using SWIFT payment system, which is an international payment system. This is one type of sanction. Germany, apart from sending military equipment to Ukrainian army, it also beefed up its defense spending in order to counter Russia. The European countries also agreed or allowed to liberalize their bureaucracy to allow Ukrainian refugees to stay in European countries. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians have been displaced by the Russian attacks on their country, and many seeking refuge in Europe. These countries agreed unanimously to admit refugees for 3 years without asking them to apply for asylum. Putin, so you have to understand another thing, escalation is that Putin had ordered Russian military to put its deterrent forces, which include nuclear weapons, on high alert. The announcement, he told his chiefs that because of aggressive statements from the West and severe criticism from the world community, he is making his defenses alert. US immediately condemned the decision, calling it unacceptable escalation. With severe losses on both the sides, Russian army also faced severe losses, and it announced for diplomatic talks. But the Ukrainian president has refused to discuss on the issue. But later on, Ukraine and president also agreed. Ukraine and Russia negotiators agreed to hold talks in Belarus. They are going to discuss, but the Ukrainian president said the operations in Ukraine will not stop even though the negotiations still going on. We have to wait until the negotiations takes place. Thank you. This is it for today. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel.